Hello, I'm Glenn W. Hunter, and with me today is Tamika J. Carter, and this is Building Girl Champs. And what we're going to talk about today is the impact of incarceration. Tamika, how did you arrive at this topic for us at this time?
There was an executive order that came out yesterday, and I haven't read up a lot on it, but I do understand that our new president is trying to make right some historical wrongs, one of those being the mass incarceration of Black and brown bodies. And so it just made me think about some prior work that I'd done around mass incarceration and parental incarceration, and a lot of the young people that I've worked with who were experiencing that.
hmm Well, I mean, it's definitely something that remains in our community. I mean, obviously, African Americans are disproportionately impacted by incarceration. And as a result of that, there is going to be trauma in our community. So let's start unpacking this because I think the time is right for us to take a deeper look and make this available for public consumption. So, when you think about it, when you think about incarceration, particularly in our community, the conversation tends to shift toward absent fathers. But I think a lot of predetermined biases surface as a result of that. So, what happens to a growing young lady of color when basically any individual in the family leaves due to incarceration?
So there are a lot of things that happen. One of those is plain and simple, just the trauma of it happening, right? The trauma of seeing your parent incarcerated, or maybe even seeing the police arrest them. The impact that that may have on a child can send them into places where they're dreaming and constantly re-experiencing it, or maybe having a really sharp reaction to seeing people in uniform. So that's one of the big pieces that it can become a trauma, not just a crisis, but an actual trauma that impacts the way that they deal with life and that they relate to people. Another big one is the grief behind it. So, again, a lot of times we only want to pair grief with death, but grief is about loss, any loss. You might lose your favorite toy, you lose your dog. And so losing a parent or a close family member to incarceration will send someone into a place of feeling lonely, and that sense of loss that, goes with all the typical stages of the grief cycle. Again, that's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And so that's a big one. Again, trauma, they're going to grieve. A lot of times, unfortunately, in our community, young people do not feel safe to grieve because incarceration has been so normalized or even glorified, right, by different types of entertainers. So a lot of times a young person is stuffing how they actually feel about it. They may even be pretending that they think it's cool that their dad or somebody got locked up. And so behind that, they aren't really able to process their deeper feelings. However, they're still acting out of them. So they may have some anger subconsciously or even unconsciously about losing that parent to incarceration, but they're acting it out. However, they're unable to verbalize it. So that's really confusing for anyone who's dealing with a youth who has a parent that's incarcerated, because again, they're not saying it, they're just acting crazy. So again, trauma, grief, the acting out. A big one is safety as well. So, especially if it was dad. A lot of times for young ladies, dad is that place that makes them feel safe and secure. I was working with a client earlier today and she's like, there's nothing like being able to say, I'm gonna go get my daddy. And so you kind of take that, it's kind of like pulling the rug from beneath the young lady's feet, especially if it was a father who was involved. And I really want to point that out because I think we really stereotype, especially Black men, and say that they're not involved. And studies actually show that it's not the truth, especially honestly, between the ages of 0 and about 2, we see that Black men spend a lot more time with their children than white men do. They are bathing their children, they are eating dinner with them, they are watching sports games with them. And so when you have that absence, when you've had that relationship, and then there's an absence and it's pulled, it's like pulling the rug from beneath their feet. And so they will struggle a lot for safety and security and do a lot of weird things to show their independence and their ability to care for themselves that are maladaptive. So, and all of that ultimately comes from a place of fear. So those are the things that I've seen mostly when I'm working with young people on how they're being affected by incarceration of a parent.
One of the points that you brought up talked about the glorification of incarceration in certain situations. How much of that really is it driven just from a community perspective? Is it the media? I mean, when the rubber hits the road, when there's a young lady trying to figure it out, what is really driving that idea of glorification that goes with being incarcerated or having a loved one incarcerated?
Yeah. Well, I will say with the glorification, that's something I probably see in males more so than females.
Mhm.
The thug life kind of thing. So I do see that again, more boys, girls less glorified. They'll glorify that their boyfriend was locked up though, or they do think that's cool. It's interesting. But I think definitely it comes from media. We know it comes from the media. We
Mhm.
we we have genres of music that have come up with all kinds of cutesy terms for being locked up, or the whole entire. There's a culture of what it means to don't be a snitch, or you're this guy if you're locked up and you're this kind of person and you're performing these types of activities. So there's an entire culture around that of course I think music has helped us kind of indulge in, especially for our males.
Mhm.
Another piece of it is actually just that we normalize trauma in our community. We normalize a lot of things. We normalize, single parenting. We normalize gunshots. We normalize getting locked up in such a way that, again, makes people or young people especially suppress it because they don't know what is safe to communicate or what is even safe or acceptable for them to feel or express about their feelings or even their thoughts or the questions that they have. I've worked with so many young people who had a parent who was locked up for maybe 4 or 5 years of their childhood, and now they're like 20 something, and they have no idea why the parent was locked up. They don't know what the charges were. They don't know if it was something, if they got the parent locked up. I've definitely worked with kids who thought something they did led to their parent being incarcerated, which sometimes, maybe, but for the most part, no. And so if they're not able to unpack that because of the cultural norms of thinking that's oh, it's just like eating a salad, no big deal. If they don't realize that that is something worthy of conversation, they're just going to stuff it and it will join all of the other things that bubble under the surface and ruin their marriage when they're 38. So,
The point is well taken. It caught me off guard a little bit, but the point is well taken because evidently the trauma doesn't just magically go away without actually creating a sense of engagement and understanding. So, but I want to go down the that path that you established of normalizing, because when you look at a specific situation, for example, a maternal figure, if not the mother themselves, being incarcerated, there's going to be trauma because now you have a young lady with someone who's obviously been a role model of some sort. So when that particular those paths collide, what types of trauma are most prevalent with a mom going to become incarcerated?
So the big thing there is when we lose anyone that's a caregiver in the home, that puts a lot more stress on the other person in the home. And I had one professor once say the kids know everything because we go around and we think we have these secrets and we live these lives that apparently our kids don't know, or if we don't, we tell them it's not their business, but they hear through the walls, they sense our feelings, they sense our emotions and our energy a lot of times. And so that parent or a caregiver who's left to raise the child is going to have a lot more stress on them. In addition to stress, they're going to have a lot more responsibilities. So with those responsibilities, they could become neglectful, right? There's only so many hours in the day. There's only so many hours that you have to work, to prepare food, to pay bills, and to talk to your kid about school. And so a lot of things kind of get dropped when that happens. Another thing that I see is with a lot of times we have, of course, in our community, some incarceration that was not necessarily fair, equitable, or did not go according to what we perceive as justice. And so for young people who have experienced that, they have really sharp reactions to government and authority. Because if a child basically witnesses their parent being disenfranchised, then their entire engagement with the democratic process is going to be decreased. And social institutions, honestly, as a whole, they're not going to see the purpose of authority, and they're not going to trust it. And so you see that showing up in school, of course, these fights with teachers and these power struggles. You're going to up at home with the remaining parent or caregiver. And so, again, it's coming from this place of fear, anxiety, and feeling just unable to cope or adjust with the changes that have occurred due to losing a parent to incarceration.
Yeah. So within all these changes, um, is there a certain likelihood of who they may reach out to for comfort and for guidance in a situation like this?
Hopefully, a therapist like myself. Um, so, kids, of course, they ask their friends because their friends know everything, right? They know how to drink it away or whatever it is they do. Unfortunately, and that's why it's so important to put a professional in their lives, or at least someone who is comfortable with emotion, right? That they can cry, scream, and yell, and they're not going to say boys don't cry, or a girl can be as angry as she wants to be, and no one's going to tell her that's not ladylike. So again, that short of a therapist or professional coach or something like that, you want someone who can take stuff, right? Who can take it and not take it personally, because they have a lot to let out. These kids, especially, some of them have visited their parents in jail. That's very traumatic. We think a lot of times, oh, that's great. They get to go see their mom, they get to go see their dad. But just that entire process and the waits and the check-ins and the not being able to do this or that can be a very traumatic experience. And whereas, the caregiver that's left may feel that it's important to take them, sometimes you got to check in with the kid because that's not what they want, or it's not healthy for them emotionally. So, I mean, myself, talk to a therapist.
Definitely a viable solution. So I'm glad that we're endorsing that one. So in totality, Tamika, with your combination of group and individual therapy with regards to the sessions that you have as you're interacting with young ladies, what is the most common issue you see with generational incarceration?
Ooh, that's a good one. Oh, man. Again, the normalization. I will say that second gen young ladies. So if mom's been incarcerated and then that young lady has a delinquent period, and whether she's in juvie or whatever, those young ladies a lot of times are more likely to adopt that kind of rough exterior. It's cool to get locked up. That made me a better person, maybe, which sometimes it can. But they kind of view it in a positive light and are eager to attend a prison again. But where we really see a lot of the issues show up, of course, with kids is school. When we look at mass incarceration, there's a huge achievement gap, right? So when we're looking at kids who have parents who are locked up, a lot of times these are the kids who are acting out in school. A lot of times they actually suffer from migraines. They have medical issues, things that are linked to the anxiety and the depression that they're unable to cope with. So one of the biggest issues I think with girls, however, is their social attachments. The way that they start interacting with people in interpersonal relationships shifts once a parent has been incarcerated, and especially once it's sunk in that they're not going to get out, next week or next year. This is they're really sitting down for the long haul. So a lot of those young ladies have social issues. They have what we call insecure attachment. They may want friends, but they're mean and push them away. They will struggle to initiate and maintain some long-term relationships or friendships at school as well. So mostly with girls, I'll say it really hits them in the relational department. I do not see that as much with boys. I think that girls really struggle to, again, just feel safe and secure, and that acts upon the way that they communicate with people, the way that they invite people into their space or use boundaries.
Wow. Again, these are very intricate discussions. These are very intricate emotions that are going through our young ladies as they're going face to face with the penal system. And consequently, the opportunity for trauma isn't just normal. It's not just community stuff. It gets multiplied as they're trying to understand where they are in the scope of their world. So with all these moving parts, and again, these things are continuing to happen regardless of executive orders. There's going to be incarceration in the African American community for the foreseeable future. These young ladies are going to need help, either in a group situation or one-to-one. Tamika, how do they get a hold of you?
Ooh, you can find me at tamikajcarter.com. That is Tamika Carter.com. You can head there, book a consultation. There's also information about some of my groups. A lot of girls do better in group prior to individual. If they're kind of shy, that helps them get to know me and that I don't bite frequently. So that's a great way to get a lot of girls started. And it's a little less expensive than individual. So again, that's Tamika, Tamika Carter.com. And I have a link right there on the front page where you can book a free consultation so that we can find out what's going on with you, your daughter, your family, and get you guys on the pathway to healing and health.
Outstanding. Once again, I'm Glenn W. Hunter. With me again, I get to share the screen with Tamika J. Carter, and this is Building Girl Champs. And as we continue to get the message out that there are tools for mental health, stronger personalities, and again, just more functional young ladies living into their growth and their excellence, I just have to say thank you once more.
Thank you.
So, Glenn W. Hunter, Tamika J. Carter, we look forward to seeing you the next time. Please like us, follow us, forward it to a friend. You never know whose livelihood you may be improving. Thank you.